I myself took a gap year, but I didn't know that it's called a gap year. After my A-level, I just told my dad, I don't want to study anymore. I studied for 18 years already. I don't want. I think I must
rare,
have.
right?
Yeah, I think in our generation, our time.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of
Spill the Tea with THG.
If you already follow us, you should already know that in this podcast, we talk about societal issues that are very close to our hearts, and we hope that the topics chosen are very relatable to you. So do catch us on Spotify.
You can also catch us on Instagram and on Facebook.
I'm Genevieve,
I'm Nicole.
and today we're going to be talking about our evolving educational system. And today we are very happy to have two guests with us today, Chee Wee and Carol.
Hi, my name is Chee Wee, and I am an ex-naval officer. I spent 19 years in the Navy. 2 years ago, I set up an educational system and a center called MAKE. And what we do is we provide hands-on enrichments and programs for children from 7 to 12 years old. And the main objective is to get them to go beyond just academic theory to include practical application as well as problem-solving skills.
Hi, I'm Carol. I have got 2 children. My first job is actually being a mother. That's a very important job. And I have served in the public service for 22 years, of which about 13 years I was with the Ministry of Education. About 2 years ago, I started a consultancy and training company doing digital literacy education and family life education. My goal is really to rally the village to educate our children together in this very complex world.
Okay, so that's very cool. Okay. Okay, so since you two already know quite a bit about educating children or just education in general, what do you guys think about the educational system in Singapore right now?
I think it's much more customized than when we were your age. In our generation, that there are some fixed courses and we go through pretty much similar experiences. But I think now there is much more customization based on the needs and the learning pace of children and teenagers. And so therefore we have got many, many different pathways. And when I interact with families, sometimes we really don't know the buffet spread is so wide. We really don't know which spread is best for my kids. And so it's a continuous journey of discovering what is happening out there and then also discovering and journeying with my own children on what suits them best and what is really their gifts and talents. And it really takes a continuous conversation, just journeying life, doing life together.
Yeah, and there are also very positive signs that I think recently there's been this shift away from the emphasis on exams and just grades. So things like just making broader bandings instead of having a specific T-scores, subject-based banding in secondary schools. These are very good moves. But of course there's this elephant in the room, right? So indeed, I think today there's still too much attention on just academic work and achievement levels in the academic domain, and which is why I started to do what I did, which is to give a little bit more platform and opportunities for children to apply what they learn. Because there's a saying about it's not just what you know, but what you do with what you know. So I think that part, the application of knowledge, is quite important, and our children may not have sufficient opportunities to build that kind of competencies. And then there is a third block, which is solving first-time problems. So a lot of our students do well because they do repetitive training. So you give them a problem and they get to practice it time and time again until they get so good at it. And then if you show them the 11th time, they can obviously excel. But life's not like that. So I think we also need to help kids in that area.
Yeah, definitely. So what do you think schools can do to help that, the application, as you said?
In general, I think, like I said, the direction is already correct. De-emphasizing and getting not just parents but society at large, including employers, to understand that a person's contribution is far beyond what can be represented on a piece of paper or certificate. So that's an important move because we need to shift mindsets first. Then in parallel, then I think what helps is actual platforms that builds on competencies that I talked about earlier. So instead of just testing knowledge retention and regurgitation, we might want to give them more practice in unfamiliar environments and build a certain intrinsic ability to cope with unfamiliar circumstances. So if you get so used at dealing with unfamiliar environments, then you won't be anxious, you won't be nervous, you sort of develop a coping mechanism. And I think that helps. So it's the difficulty, however, is it's hard to quantify this kind of training, right? So you can do all that I said, but it's hard to measure the levels of achievement. So this is where I think going ahead, the education system in general will have to reconcile.
Actually, that sounds a lot like, I was actually from Republic Polytechnic. Shout out for RP. So in RP, we did something called problem-based learning, which is very similar. Like every day is a new problem, it's a new challenge, and they change the problems like probably like every few years or every year. So it's all different. It's all new. So that really sounds like what you've mentioned before.
Exactly, yes.
And I feel like it really does help people to really apply what I learn.
Yes.
Like example, you are the business sector, and then like they give you a mini lecture, and then after that, you're introduced to the problem. After that, when the person goes into like the real world, person's like, hey, I can do this. I know this. Yeah,
Yep.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
I think we are in transition while society for the longest time we chase after grades because in the past that was how the system is. We want as many to be educated as possible. And so that served the needs in the past, but moving forward the world is getting more complex and therefore we are shifting, starting from the focus to be let's focus on grades or certification. But because it's transition, it doesn't happen overnight. So as families and especially the areas that you mentioned are very intangible. So short of having some form of measurement, people will still go for the safest, right? How do I know whether you are doing well or not? You still need to show me some results. How can I show results without some form of assessment of sorts to know how children are learning, how fast they are progressing? Am I really helping the child? So I think it's all good, but we're all navigating both as a system and as parents and as people that are supporting the system on the outside. How do we figure all these things out together? So it is a journey. I don't think it's something that can be done overnight. Sometimes people feel very frustrated. Why are parents still chasing over grades? But I think short of anything else, parents still need practical handles to know whether their children are really learning, are they progressing? And because it's still in transition, even employers, they do still look at qualification as a basic benchmark of sorts. Because everybody can have different stuff, right? So they still look at, but I don't think that's the only thing they look at moving forward, but it's still important in that sense because it's still a foot in the door. And so because it's still important in some sense, therefore families do still think that the academic areas are still important. But what I feel very strongly for is that actually there are other areas that families need to look at as well, especially on, for example, how media and technology is impacting children's learning, impacting how you see the world, impacting relationships at home. I get very tired of nagging. Can you please put down your phone? But actually you are using it for learning, you are using it for many, many other purposes. And so we are in this very complex and changing environment. And so we really need all hands on deck to have a fuller understanding of what the world is shifting to and how we can all play a part so that society is healthy.
Oh, I wish my mom was like that. No, but actually my mom is a tuition teacher, so she does like use like like her iPad, then she'll show videos to her students. So media really does like play a part lah. It can be good and bad.
It can be good and bad, definitely.
Yeah, but like talking about parents, right, and like how like about what you said about like education being more like personalized and like everything's becoming more like different lah. And like what do you think about like the gap year? Cause like some people swear by the gap year, some people are like, hey, what's that? It's just an excuse for you to just be lazy, but my parents were very very forgiving, not forgiving lah. I'll say very encouraging, cause I think the gap year has really helped me a lot. But what do you think?
I myself took a gap year, but I didn't know that it's called a gap year. After my A-level, I just told my dad, I don't want to study anymore. I studied for 18 years already. I don't want. I think I must
rare,
have.
right?
Yeah, I think in our generation, our time.
It's
His
very
children are much younger.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I thought I should just do something different. So I went to teach piano for a year. But then all my peers, they were all in university. Majority of them were in university. I felt actually if they are, and the discussions were all very interesting discussion. And I thought actually, why not? So I took 1 year to do my own thing, thinking that I can be a piano teacher for life. Yeah, I enjoyed it. It was good money, and But I think there were other things. So that year really helped me to discover myself, discover other possibilities in life. And so I went in a year late to university. But that's where I met my husband. Yeah. So there is always So it doesn't matter whether we are the same with everybody or go little bit slower. If that's how life is meant to be, then so be it. You can still live a meaningful life.
But
that's what I think also, that sometimes, especially in Singapore, we see things too linearly, right? Like right from a very young age, you get socialized with this idea of growing up, getting an education, and then going to work. It's all very linear, and it sounds that that's the way it should be. But eventually, I think everybody realized life is a meander, right? It takes on all shapes, and there's no right, no wrong. Coming back to, I just thought the whole idea about education, there can be broadly two perspectives. And conventionally, and maybe 10, 20 years ago, education is seen as preparing for employment, right? It is a prep for employability, which is something that kind of everybody needs, like it's livelihood. And I feel the shifting of times it's also an indication of the privilege that Singaporeans have, because now we're not really just talking about employability when we discuss education. We are talking about preparing an individual to the best that individual can be. So it's about actualization. It's not just about preparing the person to be employed. So I think that's an important shift. Then it's relevant to discuss things like digital literacy, things like relationship and communication, which may not be just purpose for you to be more employed. It's just for you to become, as best a person, a human being you can be. And that's more holistic. And I think we are in that privileged environment in Singapore in general.
I thought the question about what is education for is interesting, especially in Singapore when the only resource we have is people. So one perspective of it is that yes, we want to educate ourselves and our children to be a better person. There's some altruistic or softer side of it. But I mean, in our country, our context is rather unique because we don't have any other natural resources. Our only resource is our people. And so therefore, the pragmatic side of the house need to be considered as well. What if, we go up a different level and look at it systematically. What if everybody want to study aeronautics? How would that impact us as a society? What if everybody wants to do the arts? What if everybody wants to do that so there is some of those consideration that needs to take place. There's a pragmatic side of the house that probably also need to be balanced. But coming back to a family unit, I think as parents, I would look at my children and see, actually what is the gifts and talents that they have. And the school provides many opportunities to help families to discover what is already in our children. I think both of us believe we should keep the sense of wonder and curiosity in children as well. Because they're born with it. You see any toddler, they're just very naturally curious. And somehow over the years in school, they lose a little bit part of it. But
They grow up.
They have tests. They go for tuition class. They sit at the desk all day. They don't do that anymore. So I think so what I'm trying to say is that perhaps there are different considerations, and as a society we want to also look at things in balance and rather than just pushing for a certain way because there are different perspectives to this whole education issue.
But I think maybe over the years, right, about the cases about the PSLE kids, maybe the boys committing suicide. over the years, maybe like too much emphasis on grades, like what is education for? I think a lot of that has been forgotten. It's a lot of focus on grades, like Chee Wee said, and it's very sad lah. And like I think I'm glad that there's been more light shining on children's mental health as well.
Although I would suggest that the issue of mental health or suicide is actually very complex. It may not be purely based on parents' expectation on the kid. Sometimes it could be relationship. Sometimes it could be the person's self-image, you know. And so it's complex. So while maybe the environment does play a part, I think we also want to look at individual cases as well. And because many people do say that the system is the problem. It might be, but probably not the only one.
I actually have this classmate of mine. He is a MOE scholar, and his GPA is like 4, but he's never ever tried to get out of his comfort zone. He's always taking modules that are easy for him, and he's not providing himself with the environment that he can grow in, and it's always the same old modules. Even though he wants to try something new, he never ever seems to approach it. And I think that kind of attitude is very sad. Because university is about, and education as a whole is about learning how to become a better student of the world. And it's really just to broaden your mind and to do whatever you want to be and develop yourself as a person through education. But that is unfortunately the sad truth we're seeing here. But I think it's also because to do with a lot of the, especially like public jobs, they tend to look for first class honors, then they will have your pay, pay groups, which I think is quite sad, but I think it might be necessary also.
Well, so again, I shared what I see are some positive directions. So MOE, for example, has kind of leveled the degree and diploma starting schemes or pay scales, right? So that's a very notable move led by one of the largest employers, right, in the country. And then, the other thing about education is you are not doing it for now. Right, so that's the whole tricky thing about education. Whatever that we do or we plan for kids today, it's for maybe 15, 20 years later. So if you think about it, most of us go through a good 15, 20 years of formal education. All right. So if I'm looking at a 7-year-old today and thinking of what I should provide for his or her education, it's really to prepare the child for 2035, right? And then we ask ourselves, what would 2035 be like? Okay, so I believe is that education should now be really focused on the processes and the thinking skills rather than being focused on content. Now, it used to be very content-based, right? So you go and be very good at calculus, right? And then you can be something. You go be very good at IT skills, then you go and be an IT manager or a software programmer. But because we don't know what 2035 or 2040 will be like, you don't know what content competencies are going to be relevant, how do you continue on that approach? It doesn't make sense. So what I think is evergreen is ability to learn. Intrinsic competency to unlearn, relearn, pick up new skills along the way, do it fast, and remain mentally very agile. All right, which is what you see in a lot of these small and upcoming companies anyway, right? And that's sort of if you can relate to large corporate giants, that because they are very very stuck to always doing things, they can't maintain the agility to deal with changing times. So that's another angle to take, right? So instead of asking the question, what should we teach, all right? Should it be coding, for example? Now it's been made compulsory, right? A bit of should it be that, or should it be what kind of mindsets we want children to have? What kind of abilities we want them to possess in dealing with the unknown? And then you develop curriculum based on it.
And I think it's not just the system per se on how MOE can or schools can take the position on in terms of curriculum. those areas actually as families we can also,
Yeah.
in terms of how do we inculcate our children to be thinking, it starts with having good conversations in the home, right? But if we are always busy outside, we don't even have built that habit.
Yeah.
You know, if we have a thinking home, what would it look like for society? Last time they used to have thinking schools, learning nation, right? Now what if we have thinking homes? If every home we can have quality conversations about the complexities of life, about what is really important in life, what are the values that we hold dear, about even education, what's the meaning of success. If we can define it as a family, that can be very powerful in terms of how then the whole family unit achieve success as a team together, not just pushing the kids to do whatever, you know, but as a team, how do we support each other through life? Yeah, then it makes life more fun, right? More meaningful.
exactly.
Spill the tea. Spill at home together.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. So bringing it all together, what do you actually think education will be like for our children or like in the near future?
If I take a step back now, I still look at the system and smile because I have a lot more faith in people and in children's innate ability to just grow and adapt. And I think that's where life shines at, you know, being very adaptable. So I have full faith that our kids, they will find a way. And therefore, it's really not a big thing to say, okay, what the education system should be or should not be. But I kind of resonate with what Carol said about families, because schools might be a part of your life for a while, but families are there forever. So down to the simple things like when you come back from work or come back from school, you know, what do you talk about? There's this very interesting anecdote, right? So in maybe the local context, right? A lot of parents ask, so what do you learn today? You come back from school and the parents ask, what do you learn today? And then Israel, what I hear, the parents ask them, so what questions did you ask today?
Oh.
Okay, so the frame is very different. Okay, it's focused on the child, right? And you know what kind of questions or thoughts that the child has instead of, you know, what do you learn, which is
The kind of question is important. Sometimes I ask my kids, who did you help today? It brings the focus to beyond just learning. They could say, I helped my teacher carry books. That's okay. Sometimes they tell, last time when they were younger, I helped my friend do work. Oh, yeah, are you really helping your friend? I mean, that becomes interesting conversations. Or what do you do during recess? They leave for recess when they are younger. They don't go to school to study. They go to school to play during recess. But that kind of conversation will change when they're older. Like if I talk to my daughter who is 17, the conversation will be different because you're now making sense of the world, trying to help them connect dots with real world issues, because she will also hear things, read about things on social media quite a lot, and because the complex world is getting more complex, and all the more the habit of having conversation, anchoring our children with strong values is important. That is part of education.
So what do you think our education would look like in the near future?
I'm not a futurist. I can only do what I can to just rally the village. I really believe that education is not just a responsibility of a particular ministry. It involves work, really the whole society. We are educating our young together as a society, and not just push one another and say, it's your fault, it's my fault. Everybody, we should take ownership, and every one of us, regardless of whether you are a student or whatever, we all actually influence culture, and if each one of us do our part to just build a healthy culture, I mean, how nice our nation will be.
That's amazing. Okay, so do you guys have any like final tips that you wanna that you have?
To children, I would say enjoy learning, love learning, and really have fun growing up. And then to parents, I would say take a longer view. Once you lengthen the horizon, you realize everything is quite okay.
For me, it's regardless whether you're a teenager, a child, or parents, it's really be intentional in building relationships in the home. Being intentional would mean carving out time. Parents are busy, teenagers are busy, very busy, but we need to make time for ourselves, building up the family, put family time into our calendar. Otherwise, our calendar will be filled by many things. So when we are intentional in making time for each other, we can build a strong team. The first team that we parents should build is actually the team in the home. Yeah, when we build that strong team, then they would be able to be more energized, passionate about life, have more optimism about life. Yeah.
So thank you, Chee Wee and Carol, for your insight on education, and thank you so much for being part of this podcast. And once again, you can check them out on Facebook at makelearning.co and SgVillage. And that's all for this episode of
Spill the Tea with THG.
Do catch us on Facebook and Instagram, and do listen to the podcast episode on Spotify. Bye.
Bye.